So Bob Marley One Love comes to you from the director of King Richard. Yes, the same movie that gave Will Smith his arguably long-awaited Oscar. And stop me if you've heard this one, guys. This is a musician biopic. How many of these have we seen over the past decade or so? This one is centered around reggae icon Bob Marley. Marley was a Jamaican singer-songwriter who overcomes adversity to become the most famous reggae musician not just around the globe, but probably of all time. Now, full disclosure, I will admit, I can only really name 2 of Bob Marley's songs maybe off the top of my head, and I'd only be able to identify it just by listening to it, you know? Like, if I had heard it on the radio or if my dad was playing it on vinyl, I'd be able to recognize that it's Bob Marley. But in terms of listing his whole discography and every single hit that he ever had, forget about it. I couldn't list them. And I wasn't fully aware of what exactly made Bob Marley an icon. Not necessarily just his music, but his actions outside the music industry and how he uses his music to heal the world, if you will. And if you didn't know anything about Bob Marley like I didn't going into this thing, I'm not going to spoil anything what he did. But after watching this movie, I want to just dig into every single documentary that I can about Bob Marley, and I want to learn every single thing about him. This guy was freaking inspiring, man. And it's also because an hour and 47 minutes probably isn't enough to sum up this one icon's life. But I think for what they had and the material that they had for an hour and 47 minutes, yeah, it might feel a little bit long, honestly, just looking at it and how it's paced. But I think One Love does exactly what it set out to do. And that's pretty much educate a casual audience about who this man was, while also providing them with some of the most uplifting entertainment you can imagine. Not just in seeing what this man does, but the music as well. As a music person biopic, obviously you're gonna have those concert sequences. Like, I'm telling you, once you see the pattern of one of these singer-songwriter biopics, like, you can't unsee it. You're gonna have some big concert sequences thrown in there. And I think this director does a really good job helming them. Overall, I think the movie looks and sounds really good. I think the overall sound mixing is really solid. There's some cool stuff that they do with the cinematography in here as well. And I actually think it's really, really interesting that they decided to put this out in February. I get it, the word love is in the title and it came out on Valentine's Day itself. But especially as it goes with our 2 leading actors here, this feels like something that the Academy would jump all over. Kingsley Ben-Adir is a name that has popped up quite a bit over these past number of years, especially since I started doing YouTube. And he has proven more than capable of holding his own in front of the camera. He is an excellent actor, and I think he proves it once again in this movie. I think he captures all the mannerisms and the dialect of Bob Marley down to a T. But I get it, Kingsley Ben-Adir is not Jamaican like Bob Marley was. Part of me gets why the studio cast him as well, because, you know, he's a big enough name and he'll draw enough people into the theater as it is. But if you can't look past the facts that Kingsley Ben-Adir is not in fact Jamaican like Bob Marley was and you want to just trash this movie because of it, more power to you. I totally understand. Lashana Lynch, on the other hand, she practically stole the entire movie. And I'm so happy to say that because I have loved her so much. I think the first movie I ever saw her in was The Old Guard, again, during the pandemic. And she's just impressed me every single time I see her in a movie. The raw emotion that any director is able to get out of her is just so surreal to watch. It's just unbelievable how natural Lynch is in front of the camera. I cannot wait to see what else she does. Now, I did mention at an hour and 47 minutes that this movie did feel a little bit long. It had some pacing issues, which kind of contradicts my feeling of an hour and 47 minutes isn't enough to fully encapsulate who Bob Marley actually was. And that's why I feel like you should be going and watching some documentaries about this guy, especially if you go and watch this movie. If you want to learn more about him, more power to you. Go watch documentaries. But the reason why I say this movie feels a little bit slow is actually the pacing and how the director is handling some of the pacing here. My biggest issue with this movie is actually they're playing around with the timeline a lot. I'm not saying they're going completely historically fictional here because they do have Bob Marley's son Ziggy as a creative consultant on this. So I'm not really going to sit here and doubt whether or not One Love is completely historically accurate. But I actually kind of wish this story was more so told in a chronological order. Because when you do get the flashback sequences, It really drives a lot of the movie's forward momentum to a halt for me. And I understand what they're trying to do with the flashbacks. I understand the technique that they're going for here. I understand why those sequences are in the movie, but I don't know. It just felt to me like it was presented in way too inconsistent and an unorganized manner, actually. Like, seriously, there were a few times watching this where I was looking at it and I was looking at a young Bob Marley and his upbringing, and I was like, okay, where are we in the timeline here? Movie, you're losing me. You're losing me here. You're better than a 42% on Rotten Tomatoes, but you're losing me. And I think that's really what it boils down to, guys. I think One Love is not a horrible movie by any stretch of the imagination. I feel like I'm going to be very much in the minority when it comes to critiquing this thing. And it's not a perfect musician biopic or anything of the sort. Like I said, I do have some pacing issues. I do have some issues with the directing overall. But I think the performances and the uplifting message, I think that just trumps everything that's working against this movie for me. And I left this movie with a little bit more of a positive, lasting impact. Is this my favorite singer-songwriter biopic that I've ever seen in my life? No, not even close. But I think the movie was definitely very effective in accomplishing what it set out to do. And I think if you're a huge fan of Bob Marley, even if you're someone like me who didn't know a damn thing about him, go and see this, because you might learn a thing or two. I'm going to give Bob Marley One Love a B-. I don't know if the Academy is going to nominate our two leading actors here. I would love to see that, but the fact that it's coming out in February slightly works against this thing. But I'm going to hold out hope for Ben-Adir and Lynch here. Let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments section. And let me know if you guys are a big fan of Bob Marley, if you're a fan of reggae. Let me know down in the comments there. And let me know what your favorite Bob Marley song is. What's the one Bob Marley song that anytime you hear it, you just can't turn it off and you can't help but sing along and dance to it? There's a lot that we can discuss over here in terms of movies and all things entertainment. If you guys are looking for a great outlet and a great community to join in discussing all these topics, you guys have come to the right place. So do consider becoming a subscriber. Tap on that thumbs up as well. Both those things would be humongously appreciated. Thank you guys so much for your continued support and your continued patience of my uploads. I understand that they're not as frequent as they used to be, but I'm going to be opening up a show here in a couple of weeks, and I feel like once that clears up and once my evenings are a little bit more open, a lot more content is going to be cranked out from that point forward. So stay tuned, guys. Stick around. You don't want to miss a new upload. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.